Today's Yomi is Menachos Daf Yudches, Menachos 18. And so today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start on the top of Yudches Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top, where Gemara said the position of Rabbi Yehuda. We're 6 lines from the top on Yudches Amud Aleph, where Rabbi Yehuda said that according to everybody, it's disqualified if your machshava, if your thought was just to leave it over till the next day, just to leave the blood over, not to sprinkle it. No, that's not pigul, but Rabbi Yehuda says according to everybody, it's still disqualified. Tanakama says it's kosher. So the Gemara says 6 lines from the top on 18a, V'savar Rabbi Yehuda laniach midamo lemachar divrei akol pasul. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that according to everybody, if your machshava was, if your thought was to just leave it over for the next day, it's disqualified? Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that? Jeff. Oh, okay. Gemara says, is that really the case? Tanya, that we have a brisa where it says, Rabbi Kishalachtu Limsos Midosa, Yitzal Rebbe Lazar ben Shemua, V'Amri Lo Limsos Midosa, Rebbe Lazar ben Shemua. Rabbi said when I went to go, and Rashi says Limtos is to squeeze out Midosa. You know, it's like a metaphor about wine or a phrase, expression. And then went out to ask all my questions, to squeeze out all my questions to ask him, or else to squeeze out all of his knowledge, to try and get as much knowledge from him as possible. So I went to Rabbi Lezer ben Shemua Motzasi Yosef Habavli, Yosef Lefanav. I found Joseph the Babylonian sitting in front of him. And he was so beloved by him that Rabbi Lezer ben Shemua loved Yosef Habavli so much. Rashi says, until he came to this question. Or Tosfos says, no, it implies he loved him so much, like his soul was connected, or he loved him the most, or they were like one. So Amar Rebbe, so he said, so Rebbe Lezer ben Shavua said to Yosef Abavli, Rebbe found Yosef Abavli said to Rebbe Lezer ben Shavua, Hashochet es hazevach, v'aniach damo midamo machar mahu. He says, what's the halacha if when you slaughter the carbon, you want to leave over the blood till the next day? That was your machshava. Amol kosher. He says that's not a disqualifying thought. Arvis, he asked him again that night. He said kosher. Shachris, he asked him again in the morning. Amol kosher. Tzarayim in the afternoon. Amol kosher. Mincha, as the sun was setting again, he asked him. Amol kosher. Ella, but this time he had a little bit there. That Elich Rabbi Eliezer posel, but Rabbi Eliezer says it's disqualified. So remember, Rabbi Yehuda said, according to everybody, it's disqualified. Here he says that's the position of Rabbi Eliezer. All of a sudden, Yosef Habavli's face lit up. Amar lo. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Shemua said, Yosef, what do you mean? I didn't make you happy until now? Why all of a sudden are you happy? This you like? You don't like anything else? Amar lo, Rabbi. Hein, Elish Rabbi Yehuda, Apostle Shanali. But Rabbi, it's true. What happened was that Rabbi Yehuda taught me it was disqualified. The Chazarti al Kol Talmidav, and I was going to all of his students. Ubikashtili Chaver. I was looking for somebody who could tell me where does Rabbi Yehuda say it's possible. V'lo matzati, and I didn't find anything similar to what Rabbi Yehuda said. Achshav sheshanitali possible. But now that you told me that according to Rabbi Eliezer it's disqualified, it's like you returned to me the lost object that I was missing. Zolgu Einov Demoshe Belezer ben Shemua. The eyes of Belezer ben Shemua filled with tears. Amar Ashrechem Talmidei Chachamim Shedivrei Torah Chaviven Olav B'Yoser. He says, look how beloved, how fortunate are the Torah scholars that your Torah study is so precious upon you. Karol of Amikra Zeh, and Rabbi Lezer ben Shemua said about Yosef Abavli, look how he said this verse, Ma havti Torah secha ko hayom misichasi. Look how much I love your Torah. All the day is my conversation. So, and now the Gemara says the question, and that the reason why, and then Rabbi Lezer ben Shemua continued. He says the reason why Rabbi Yehuda told you it was possible is Mimnei Rabbi Yehuda ben Nosha Rabbi Eli, Talmid of Rabbi Eliezer. It's because his father's Rabbi was Rabbi Eliezer. And Lefikach Shanocha Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer. Therefore, he said to you it's disqualified because that's what Rabbi Eliezer taught. Now is the question: and if you said that Rabbi Yehuda said according to everybody it's possible, then then Rabbi Eliezer ben Shmuel didn't return your lost object. You plucked the camera away, and he said it was a dispute. Rabbi Yehuda said according to everybody, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Shmuel says it's a dispute about whether or not it's disqualified. So Ella. So the Gemara says, "Elamai, you mean to say that Rabbi Yehuda thought it's kosher for Rabbi Eliezer posel, and Rabbi Eliezer said it was posel? Then posel is naye. Why would he talk if Rabbi Eliezer posel? Posel is naye. So in fact, so what are you saying? So what do you think? You thought that that even Rabbi Yehuda taught that it was a machloket. Rabbi Eliezer said it's disqualified. Then what's the case that he said he taught it this way because his father's Rebbe was Rebbe Eliezer? If that's the case, he taught it as a dispute. And we also have it as a dispute. So it wouldn't make sense to say this is why he taught as a dispute. This is why he taught it. He taught it as a dispute just like we did, even though he's not our teacher. So Ella, Divrei Akol, Pasal, Asnaya. Rabbi Yehuda said, according to everybody, it's disqualified. And what does it mean? You returned to me my lost object. At least you found me somebody else who says it's disqualified, like Rabbi Yehuda. Otherwise, I would have had nobody who says it's disqualified. And that was like you returned the lost object to me. That's why Rabbi Yosef Abavli was face lit up. And because the words of the Torah are so precious to him. Okay, so that's a beautiful Agadata. And now we have the next Mishnah. Now, just as an introduction to the next Mishnah, that we know how would the mincha take place? They first would pour a little bit of oil into a kli, into a vessel. Then they add the flour. Then more oil would be poured in. And then sometimes more oil will be added, but then, not always, but then a third oil would be added after it was baked, and then at first before the third oil was baked, it was broken up into pieces, and then a third oil was added on top of it, and then after that the lavona was put on top of it. Then it was brought to touch the corner of the altar. That's called a hagasha, and after it touched the southwest corner of the altar, there was a kamitza, and then the kamitza was put in another utensil, and then the lavona was put on top of the kamitza, and then the kamitza went on the altar, and then it was salted, and then it was offered. So there's our Mishnah, Lo Yatzak. Here it's talking about the third oil. If you didn't do the third oil, which is on the broken pieces of the mincha, or Lo Balo, or if you didn't do the second oil, you didn't mix together the flour and the oil, you didn't mix that second oil, Velo Pasas, or if you didn't crush up the mincha into smaller pieces, v'lo malach, if you didn't do the malicha, v'lo hanif, or if you didn't wave it, there were two minchas that required, or possibly three minchas that required waving. The mincha sota, the minchas kenos required waving, and also the omer, if that's a mincha, which we have considered it a mincha. Low he gave if you didn't do that gasha, osha passes on piece of merubo. So if you broke into large pieces, below mashlan, and then you didn't pour the oil on the rikike, the ones that were baked in the oven after they were baked, even though you're missing all of these things, kashera, the mincha is still kosher. Gemara says, let's analyze this. What does it mean, ma'ilo yatzak? What does it mean if you didn't pour the oil on it? Ilay ma'ilo yatzak klal. If it means you didn't pour any oil on it at all, no, it has to be that you poured this third oil on. It's essential because the Rashi, so it's two possible psukim that mean it would be essential. So what does it mean, lo yatzak? Lo yatzak kohen. It means if the kohen didn't do it, elazar, that even if a non-kohen did it, would be kosher. Well, if that's your reading of the Mishnah, lo ba'al nami, when it wasn't mixed in together, the second oil wasn't poured on and it wasn't mixed. You mean to say nami lo ba'al kohen elazar? You mean to say that a non-Kohen did it, and it would still be kosher? low ball call, but if it was not mixed at all, it'd be psula, be disqualified. It can't be that if it was not mixed, it's disqualified. Vatanan, we learned on top of Yudchas and Beis, Shishim Nivwalin, if you have 60 sarona flour, then it's possible to mix it in well. If it be 61, it wouldn't be kosher. And we asked about this. Even if it wasn't mixed, who cares? That you don't need to mix it. It's kshera. So that, by the way, we see from here, this is our question. We'll go back to it in a second. And this is the Gemara that appears all over shots. It appears in Yevamos, the Darim, Kedushim, Baba Basra, Menachos, again in Menachos, in Kulin, Nida. So 8 times you remember this Gemara. It's a very powerful point. If it's capable of being mixed, then the mixing is not essential. But if it's not capable of being mixed at all, if it's 61 flour, then Bila Ma'kevespo. Then the Bila would disqualify. But anyway, we see from here that Bila is not required at all. So by the Yitzika, we know that the pouring of the oil, we know it's at least required by the non-Kohen. And here it's not required at all. So the Mishnah is talking about 2 different scenarios. And the Gemara says exactly. Yeah, they're each talking about their own scenario. In both cases, kosher. Well, Yatzak, what it says he didn't pour means well, Yatzak Kohen Elazar, that if the non-Kohen poured, it's kosher. But if the non-Kohen didn't pour at all, it's not kosher. Well, Baal Albon says if you didn't mix, it's kosher, means Baal Klal, even if you didn't mix it at all. Okay, so then we said Osha Pasas piece in merubos. If you broke into large pieces, it's still kosher. Hash, the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Hash Pasas Klal Kashera. If you didn't mix it up, break it up at all, it's kosher. Piece in merubos mean by if you broke it into large pieces, do you need to tell us that it's kosher? Meaning, if you don't break it into any pieces, it's kosher. For sure, if you broke into large pieces, it's kosher. Gemara says, no. My piece in merubos, what does it mean if you broke into large pieces, it's kosher? Sheriba b'petzisin. It means that, and what does it mean, piece in merubos? It means that you made it just the opposite. Too many pieces. You broke it up too small. You buy a sema, or alternatively, low one piece of merubos mamish. It's very large pieces. You might have thought, in that case, who the Torah's chalas. In that case, at least if it's a large, at least if you didn't do it, it's still called a chalas, so it's kosher. The low Torah's chalas it's nishtaher. It's not a loaf and it's not pieces. So if a low Torah's piece and it's not pieces, so we might have thought it's no good. Kamashon, it's still kshera. So the Gemara says, "Blame masnis in the look Rabbi Shimon." Remember, we started off our whole masechta like this 17 days ago. We said the first mission is not like Rabbi Shimon. Now again, we say maybe this mission on Daf Yud Ches is not like Rabbi Shimon. Why? The Tanya, what does Rabbi Shimon say? Rabbi Shimon Omar Kol Kohen she'eno modeh ba'avoda ein lo chelek b'kehuna. Rabbi Shimon says any Kohen who's not modeh ba in the avoda, he doesn't agree with the service. He's a heretic. He doesn't agree with it. He cannot do the service. Ein lo chelek b'kehuna. Shenemar, as it states, ha'makar v'stam hashlamim v'sachelov nimnei Aaron lo siyeh shoka yamin l'mana. One who brings the blood of the shlamim and the fat from the children of Aaron, he is the one who gets the right side of the portion. Meaning to say modeh ba'avoda, that only if you are modeh ba'avoda, if you admit to the service, if you're erol chayid, yesh lo chelek b'kehuna, then you get a portion. She'eno modeh ba'avoda, if he doesn't admit to the avoda, ein lo chelek b'kehuna, he has no portion. And it's not only this. Minay l'rabos tes vav avodas. How do I know all the avodos? If you're not molded to them, you don't get a portion. That you can't do them. How do I know this case that if you're not molded to the avodah, you don't get a portion and you can't do them? How do I know? And it lists the avodos, and this is the question because it shows that yitzika is an avodah, which means it can't be done by a non-kohen. So we continue. This is Rabbi Shimon. So the proof is that Rabbi Shimon is saying that a Kohen is the one who has to do the Yitzika, and our Mishnah says a non-Kohen can do it. But anyway, we'll read the Brisa. One of these 15 avodas, Yitzikos, Vabalilos, Vapasisos, Vamalichos. We already translated these. Vatanufos, the waving, Vagoshos, coming close, Vamakmitzos, the Vaktara, the burning, Vamalikos. Now we're talking about bird killing. Vakaboos, the receiving of the blood, Vazos, the sprinkling, Vashka Sota, giving the Sota woman to drink, Varifas Egla, breaking the neck of the calf for the Egla Rufa, although that's really not an avoda, but that has to be done in front of the Kohanim. But the Aras Mitzora, the purification of the Mitzora, Nesius Kapayim, and Berkas Kohanim, whether it's in the base of Mikdash or outside, Minayin. How do we know that if you're not molded to these avodas, how do we know that that a Kohen is not molded to these avodos? There's no portion in the Kuna. Tamomer b'nei Aaron, avodah masura of b'nei Aaron. It has to be given over to the children of Aaron. Kol Kohen she'eino modeba eno chelos b'kahuna. Any Kohen who's not molded to it, he has no portion. Anyway, we see from here, Rabbi Shimon says that the Kohen has to do the Yitzika. Rav Nachman Lokasha. So Rav Nachman says, no, it's not a difficulty. Our Mishnah could even be like Rabbi Shimon. Why? Kama minchas Kohanim, kama minchas Yisrael. By a mincha v'Kohen, the Kohen has to do the avoda. They have to do the Yitzika. But by a mincha v'Yisrael, then even a non-Kohen could do it. Minchas Yisrael the bas kamitza, because there was the mincha of the Kohen was entirely burnt, but the mincha Yisrael had kamitza. The mincha Yisrael, which since it required kamitza, kamitza ve'elach mitzvah skuna. Only from kamitza onward is the mitzvah of the Kohanim. So that teaches us that the process that before the kamitza, the yitzika and the blila, we made a yitzika blila shekshera bazar, that they're kosher by non-kohen. Minchas Kohanim do avas kamitza, but the minchas Kohanim that didn't have kamitza meikara by kohuna. It requires a kohen from the outset. So the Gemara says, Amrei Rava, Michti Minchas Kohanim Mehechos Ravi. So Rava challenges Rav Nachman, says, where do we know the whole idea of Yitzika by the Kohanim Mehechos Ravi Yitzika Minchas Yisrael? Only from the Minchas Yisrael. Ma'asam Kshera Bazar. So if that's the case, we should say, just like by the Minchas Yisrael, it's Kshera by a non-Kohen. Afachanami Kshera Bazar. Also here it's Kshera by a non-Kohen. Or alternatively, we have an alternative. So Rava challenges Rav Nachman. We have an alternative version of this conversation. It's Ikadamri. Amrav Nachman Kasha, Kam Benikmatzos. One is by the mincha that has the kamitza, i.e. the mincha of Yisrael, and one is by the mincha that doesn't have a kamitza. Kam Nikmatzos. That's the mincha of the Kohanim. Amalei Rava, Michti Shein Nikmatzos Me'echas Rabbi Yitzika. Nikmatzos, Kinikmatzos, Ma'atam Ksher B'zar, Afachinamik Ksher B'zar. So it must be, and that's basically the same, right? So just instead of calling Kohanim and Yisrael, they call it Kamatzos and Eno Nikmatzos. But anyway, they say at the end, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shimon. So now the Gemara, okay, hold on, that's today's stop. We'll just stop the recording.